The investigation into Alaska Airlines Flight 261 began, but the wreckage lay 700 feet down. At the National Transportation Safety Board headquarters in Washington, the investigators' immediate concern was to find out what had brought the plane down.
We immediately suspected some problem in the tail of the airplane, which is where the controls are. Just something was wrong back there, and that was the key piece of wreckage to look for.
The MD-83 that crashed was a revised version of the Douglas Corporation's popular DC-9. Over 2,000 were delivered to airlines worldwide. The engines were at the rear of the plane, and the distinctive T-shaped tail was an essential element of the design.
In a big turbojet aircraft, one of the rather brilliant elements of the design is that since you're going to be loading passengers and cargo, you want to be able to have that aircraft loaded a little nose heavy or a little tail heavy. Well, in order to do that, you actually had to have that entire stabilizer moving. But the ones that are the most difficult to engineer are the T-tailed airplanes, where you have the vertical stabilizer and the horizontal sitting on top. And we call that stabilizer trim. And that is an essential element of what makes these aircraft so usable.
In the MD-83, a motorized jack screw on the tail moves the horizontal stabilizer up and down. As the stabilizer moves up, the nose of the airplane moves down. As the stabilizer moves down, the nose moves up. But what role had the 2-foot jack screw played in the loss of Flight 261? The investigators were anxious to inspect it as soon as it was recovered from the ocean floor.
The jack screw wasn't mated with the nut that it screws into. It was just by itself. And the nut was found in another piece of structure a few feet away from where the jack screw was. To have a screw separate itself from a nut with very thick threads surprised us. Secondly, we noticed that there was a curled piece of brass around the jack screw, and all of the threads that you can see here, these ridges, were gone. They had been stripped out, and the remnants of those were found coiled on the jack screw.
Once the thread had been stripped off the nut, the jack screw could no longer turn. The pilots could not have known the real nature of the problem.
The crew was confronted with a situation that had never occurred before. There is no failed jack screw procedure in the quick reference handbooks that they have available. There is no training for it.
The pilot's attempts to free the jammed stabilizer inadvertently made the situation worse. When the pilot switched both the electric motors on, the jack screw moved, but the threads had given way, and the jack screw was now held only by a single retaining nut. From here on, the plane was doomed.
That end nut was never designed to hold the loads generated aerodynamically by the airplane.
The retaining nut grew weaker and weaker.
Then, finally, through the loads beating down on that nut, the nut finally failed.
Feel that? Yep. Okay, give me slats.
The jack screw slid completely out of the Acme nut, allowing the horizontal stabilizer to move well beyond its aerodynamic limits.
The stabilizer forced the plane down, and now, completely out of control, it rolled over into its final dive.